zoning
I might be one
concept.
shy.
We can share.
Yeah.
One big happy board.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. You don't know it by heart?
I pretty much do, but I want to keep it short and not go off on a tangent, so you can all get on with your evening. We're being recorded, right? It's okay. Okay. So thank you, Craig, and to the zoning board for having me. I just wanted to give you an update and fill you in on what the Economic Development Committee has been doing as far as the downtown and some of the things that we're hoping to do. We'd really love to just, one, have your input and support, especially in regard to zoning, because we're not experts on zoning by any means, and we want to make sure that you knew the things we were thinking about and hopefully have your support and involvement going forward. So I'll keep this brief, but I just wanted to give you the short background of how this came about. So we started talking about the downtown about 2 years ago, sort of the summer of 2017. The EDC's been around for about 5 years, and the question I always got, and I've been on the committee since it started, because of Chris. And the question we always got was, you know, what can we do about downtown? And it sort of seemed like the elephant in the room, and it seemed like a big issue to tackle. But when we started talking seriously about the road work being funded, it seemed like the time was right to really start to talk about it. So we thought, okay, well, first we want to make sure if we're going to do anything, we want it to be with public participation and support, and a real community effort. So we started off by putting out a survey asking people what they were looking for downtown, and we got 427 responses, which we thought was pretty good, and overwhelmingly strong support for things like restaurants, cafes, bakeries, pubs, small-scale retail, and pretty broad-based support for mixed use. Only 15% of respondents said that they were not in favor of mixed use, and the rest saying either yes, they were in favor of it, or it depends. And as we started digging in, we learned that not only was there broad-based support for all of these things, but we were kind of reinventing the wheel a little bit with our survey, because we realized that these things had been discussed pretty at some great length, both in the 2008 master plan and again as part of a SHOPC report that was done in 2015. So this was not news, but it affirmed what kind of we've been hearing anecdotally, which is that people are interested in having more stuff going on downtown and having it look a little better. We asked a lot of questions, not just about businesses, but also in mixed use, but also about beautification efforts and ways to bring the community together, green space, benches, flowers, trails, connectivity to other parts of town. So there was strong broad-based support. So from there, we engaged the Urban Land Institute, and they came and did a one-day study with us about a year ago, and gave us a report with some suggestions. We had a whole panel of, some of you may have been there, but we had a whole panel of developers and engineers and downtown planners, talking with local residents and stakeholders about what we wanted to see. They gave us a report and some suggestions, and that's sort of our springboard for moving forward. We've had about 5, I think, so far, maybe more, public forums where we've invited members of the public to come and give their input. Craig's was really helpful, involved in a working group session that we did last year to talk about some of the problems we knew we were going to face to do things downtown. So the kind of 2 major takeaways, and this won't come as a surprise to any of you guys, but 2 of the major takeaways is that there are the hindrances to moving forward. It's not as simple as finding somebody who has a cute coffee shop who wants to come downtown. We need to lay the foundation, which is fixing zoning and addressing the wastewater treatment facilities or lack thereof downtown. So those are kind of the 2 big issues, and of course, kind of going hand in hand with that is how to fund some of that. So we started talking about zoning, and then the zoning issue got a little bit of a kick in the pants last fall when we started talking about 2 Main Street, and mixed use was kind of put on the front burner, and people were talking about that, and having had not much experience in that area previously, I was shocked to learn that the definition of mixed use in the town's bylaw did not include what we all modernly think of as mixed-use development, which is residential with retail on the bottom. And so from there, we thought, well, why don't we just fix that? And why don't we add to that list of things that are considered mixed use, the potential to have that? And so we've been working with the planning board. They rejected that idea, said they needed something more comprehensive, and we've been going back and forth with them. They've agreed to work collaboratively with us, but what they've asked us to do is they've asked the Economic Development Committee to propose a zoning bylaw or overlay specific to the downtown area for them to review and then either agree or give comments and to bring forward either with or without their support. So we're hoping that that you will support our efforts in that, and any input that you have, we certainly want to take into consideration, because that is certainly one of the main impediments to moving forward with any of the ideas that we have. As far as funding, we applied for a grant just recently. We'll find out about it probably next month at some point. It's a community development grant that's funded through the Office of Environmental Affairs at the state level, but they do grant money for things like zoning and infrastructure with an eye towards, sustainability and things like that as well. And one thing that our committee's discussed at length is that not only do we obviously we know the zoning needs to be amended. It lines up with not only the recommendations of the ULI, but of the 2008 master plan, of the SHOP-C report. The diversity in housing stock is something that is obviously a major issue for our town right now. So to be able to, it's good for economically. We've got a lot of strong businesses in town that have trouble seeking talent because people have trouble coming in here from Boston, and some of that younger talent pool might not be able to or want to move into a 5-bedroom colonial in Southborough. But if we had some other options with some walkability, some places to go, then we might be able to work with them. Also, as far as affordable housing goes, that gives us different opportunities for that as well. So there seems to me, at least, that the stars seem to be aligning for some of these things, and we think mixed use is a part of it. But we also think it's a great opportunity while we're looking at zoning, and we're hoping some of the funding, if we get awarded some grant money, could be used for also setting some design guidelines. So that, because this, we understand we don't want there to be, a Target downtown or an Applebee's. Like, we understand. We've been speaking to members of the community for 2 years, and what everybody wants is small scale, local, independently owned stores and restaurants. So, but I think that if we have some design guidelines in place, then that'll alleviate some of the fears about what could happen. To anybody who saw my colleague Dave McKay from the EDC, his presentation to the Board of Selectmen last night, we actually found some amazing photos of Southborough, downtown Southborough, through the 20th century in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. It was vibrant. We had 4-story buildings. We had a big school. We had some beautiful, beautiful structures in town that have since either been replaced or demolished by fire. And now, we hear a lot of people saying we don't want anything to change. Well, it is changing, and it has been changing, and it's just been changing for the worse. So if we don't do anything, it's going to continue to deteriorate and change for the worse. So we're trying to put the structure and controls in place to encourage positive change that works with what the look that we want to give, the feel that we want to give, and the amenities we want to provide to the community. So funding, the other piece is that we're going to hopefully get some funding for a feasibility study for infrastructure for wastewater management. It's something we've been spending a lot of time on. We're working with other towns who have solved for this. We're not the only New England town who was built before this infrastructure was in place and now is trying to figure out how to modernize a little bit. So we have some good leads on that. We're working with Paul Pazinski of the Board of Health, who's been an incredible resource to us as well. All this, along with beautification and connectivity, we think is a big part of bringing the community together. So what we're hoping to do, my timeline is maybe ambitious, but we started this off by saying that we wanted to bring a zoning amendment to fall town meeting. At this point, that looks like that might be a little rushed, but we are, per the planning board's request, Dave McKay and I have been working to look at other towns that we might want to emulate as far as zoning and start looking at their bylaws and kind of trying to call out things that work that we might want to replicate here to follow the planning board's directive of having us prepare an amendment. And so we'll continue to work with them and hopefully be able to engage a consultant to help us with it because we both have jobs and it takes a lot of time. So I think that's that's kind of where we stand. And again, we just wanted to, and you know, we're really big on transparency and cross collaboration, and we think that this committee's this board's input would be helpful and valuable, and we also would love your support. We're setting up a time to go in front of ShopC. We're working with the Trails Committee. We're really trying to make this a community effort in every sense of the word. So, so if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're still welcome.
Yep, no, I didn't have my microphone on. I got a glare.
I know.
Anybody have any questions on this at the moment, just from the kind of highlights of the ideas that you want to go through? I know one of mine is, you know, adding a multifamily type use to this type of district and doing some sort of overlay. You know, hearing what we heard and just going through to Main Street, everybody seems to think, you know, somewhat surprised that we don't have it, for one. That's true. But also the concern is, you know, no one's wanting to see one of the buildings from Madison Place plop down in
Absolutely.
downtown. And so, you know, what sort of parameters have you kind of been self-imposing on your plan so far, just to make sure that doesn't happen?
That's a really good question, and it's one we actually asked the planning board for some feedback on. We said, you know, let's try to get those sort of parameters in place before we just go and write a bylaw. Let's sit down and try to agree on things like how many stories is acceptable? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it something else? You know, setbacks. Some of the, you know, I work in real estate and I do deals, so like a letter of intent, like what are the terms that we want to agree on before we invest all this effort into a bylaw? And they said kind of figure it out and come to us and we'll talk about it then. So that's how we're doing it, because that's what they asked for. But I agree, those are really important things to think about. And again, I think that's why we were feeling a little lost, because that's, you know, we are not zoning bylaw writers by trade. So that's why we talked about trying to engage a consultant with the hopefully funding that we hopefully are awarded, and also starting to look at how other towns have done it successfully in ways that we think fits with our vision. Another thing that we're working on right now is we're trying to get some professional renderings prepared, just to be able to have something to visualize. I think that was really instrumental in the Main Street project, when people were saying, oh, there's going to be a highway going downtown, but once they kind of put out the effort to make sure everybody saw that that was not the case and people were able to visualize it, then it was a lot more palatable and people understood the benefits of it. So I think that's important. But I'm sorry I don't have a better answer to your question, but it's definitely something that we're thinking about. Okay. And if anybody has input on that, we'll certainly take it.
Yep. Anybody else?
I don't have a question, but just a comment. I think that it's excellent that the EDC is doing this.
Thank you.
I definitely support it.
Thank you.
Because I think the 2 Main Street thing for me, I was also really surprised that when we carefully read the bylaw to find out that basically the only apartments that there can be in Southborough are 40B, accessory apartments, or just the grandfathered apartments. And there already are a lot of apartments in the downtown area. They're just grandfathered. So I took some notes down on what you were saying, because I'm also on the master plan committee, which is actually meeting in 10 minutes. And, you know, there the objective is to update the 2008 master plan. Just to fill you in, one of the things that we've talked about is that the 2008 master plan has a really long list of what were the objectives to be accomplished. There were, I want to say, over 150 goals to accomplish, and a much smaller number of them were actually accomplished. So I think that what we're trying to do is to have a smaller number of things to accomplish and the goals to accomplish in the next 10 years. I know I've been advocating that this should be one of them. And one thing I've heard from people on the committee is there seems to be, in terms of building support for something like this at the town meeting, that I think people are concerned about the idea of apartment buildings, just the number of stories that were involved. And that was interesting to hear that, historically there were 4-story buildings in Southborough and.
Yeah, we have some great pictures that I don't have here today, but we'll be making more publicly available. We're putting together some information packets, and they'll be in there. But it's fascinating to see. But they looked really nice. They looked like they belonged in Southborough. They didn't, it wasn't obtrusive or didn't look overdeveloped. It wasn't a skyscraper. It fit, and it's interesting. It was fascinating to me, and that's all new to me in the last few weeks. There's actually a video that somebody put together that shows Southborough through the years, and it's amazing. It's really almost shocking to see a then and now back to back.
On the wastewater treatment issues, what's the solution? Is it to have sewers, or can a restaurant actually open up? Because my understanding is they need something better than what they've.
Well, I think that, so there are businesses down here, right? And one thing that we're actually working on right now is we're figuring out what sorts of systems they have. Anecdotally, we think that they are antiquated and expensive, and probably places like Moro's and the Pizza Place and other, restaurant-based businesses that have a higher volume of water usage probably have to get them cleaned regularly once a month. So we're trying to figure out what kind of systems they have, what sort of condition they're in, and how much they're paying for maintenance of them, because we're trying to think of ways that maybe we could keep cost level or lower by having a more communal-based system. And Weston has done something really interesting, and we actually have a meeting set up with them. I believe it's this week or next week. Next week. And they have, it looks like a greenhouse, and it's like not that big. It's like 40 feet by 60 feet, I think are the dimensions. It looks like a greenhouse, and it's literally a waste management system. It's you can have lunch in it, but it's where all the sewage is processed in the downtown, just specifically for the downtown. They put that in, I think it was, I want to say 20 years ago. And I think it cost then a little shy of $1 million. So not nothing, but also not insane. Not something that's totally out of the scope. The problem is the guy who wants to come and put it in a little coffee shop doesn't have that capital, right, to do that. So we need to do something that's a little bit, that's the problem. That's the roadblock for an individual business owner who wants to come in, especially without the option of having a multi-use, is that they don't have the capital to invest in a system like that. But if we make it more of a communal effort and maybe we're exploring grant options combined with maybe some, potentially some development options, and maybe tying in existing businesses and maybe even existing residences to the extent that they want to participate into it, we might be able to come up with that money. It's not an unsurmountable amount of money from what we know so far.
Yeah, just briefly, for someone who's been here since, living in Southborough off and on since the 70s, to see the downtown actually deteriorate from the time when I first lived here to now. So I really applaud the EDC and keeping this forefront. I'm with Andrew on this has got to be one of the key things with respect to the master plan going forward, because without that, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of residents are concerned about. Like, none of us want a Target, an Applebee's, apartment buildings. No one wants that, but to see even where it was 30 plus years ago to where it is now is depressing.
Yeah.
And, we all really care about Southborough, it's this great little town, but our downtown is really in bad shape. And so,
And it's bad for our property values.
Yeah,
It's
that's
bad
just
for our
it.
communities, our
It's
realtors.
bad for our
can do
taxes.
about it. It's bad
yeah,
for our taxes.
that's it.
And something that both of you have mentioned is, you were talking about the master plan committee and the recommendations, and we've read the master plan report from 2008, and we know very little was implemented. The SHOP C report that came out in 2015, which was adopted by both the planning board and by the Board of Selectmen, gave a timeline with they had a whole section that I could have, again, something I just discovered about 3 weeks ago, but that we could have that could have been pulled out from one of our reports of all the things that we thought needed to get done downtown in regards specifically to mixed use. And there was a timeline for adopting it, and nothing happened. And so everybody agrees on this. So that's why I fully support the new master plan committee. I think it's important work to do, but we've invested on the EDC a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this, and I don't want it to be another report that sits on the shelf, and in 10 years somebody says, well, they compiled all this information and everybody agreed what we had to do, and still nothing's done. So I'm pretty passionate about trying to make it happen, and it's a little frustrating to see that over the years, people have come to the same conclusions, found the same roadblocks, even, infrastructure is one thing that's gonna take some money and some thought. The zoning, that's completely in our own control. And the fact that we can't figure that out after more than a decade of recognizing it as a critical issue from so many different perspectives is shame on us. Let's fix that. So I support, one of the proposals of the planning board was that we wait until the master plan committee is done and then come back with recommendations on zoning. And my position is we've done that. We've done that a few times. We know what the recommendations are. Nothing's changed downtown except for that maybe it's gotten a little bit more dilapidated. So let's take the information we have and execute it now. Why are we waiting another 2 years to bring it back to planning board, rehash the same issues, and then start to tackle it? We know it's there. Let's deal with it. So our hope is, I think, at this point, fall town meeting might be a little ambitious, but we're going to be working hard, and if we need to call a special town meeting to do it, we will. I think we've got the community behind us. From our perspective, it's a big PR campaign because everyone I talk to says, oh yeah, we want to do that, but to get people to show up at town meeting and vote for it, because obviously we need the 2/3, so we're going to have to tell your friends. So.
Yeah, and then just to pile on to what Michael was saying, no one wants to see an Applebee's or something in downtown. What they want to see even worse is it just abandoned. Mm-hmm. The fact that none of the businesses can make it work because there isn't anything else going on down there, and it just becomes pointless to try and have a business there.
Exactly.
And that would be worse.
Right.
And with St. Mark's here, and with the traffic that goes into the Southborough Medical Center, I think it's like 70,000 people a year come in and out of there or something, and they have hundreds and hundreds of employees that work there. We have the potential to have the foot traffic to support the businesses. It's just the infrastructure. Right. So there are a few you'll see, and I didn't go through this very detailed, but I kind of outlined the area of what we're talking about in the downtown business village district. They're also, we're trying to focus in on a few different potential areas for development that we think could work, that we think, obviously there's a lot of, we're limited on space, and that's reality. But I think that there are a handful of properties that we're going to start to focus in on, work with the owners, and see if and what they can do, of what they'd be willing to do. So, and try to help facilitate bringing in the right people who can and have the means to put something in.
So what do you need from us other than to keep us informed and
That's a good question. And I think, we want everyone to be in the loop, and we think you guys are very critical. To the extent that we are able to bring something forward to town meeting, the planning board has agreed that, what we propose, they'll give their comments. They may or may not support it, but they would bring it forward. And go through the process of having the required meetings about it and everything, and bring it forward at town meeting. I'm not sure if they'll support it or not, but what I'm hoping is that, if that's balanced out by support from this committee and or support by the Board of Selectmen, I think it's important for the leaders in our town to to be behind us to help establish more support. So we wanted to make sure that you knew what we were doing, and any input or feedback or suggestions that you have, we value. So we want to keep you informed, hopefully come back again at some point and give you an update. And to the extent you have anything that you think would be helpful to us, we certainly want that, but mostly we just want you to be informed and us to be on the same page, so hopefully you'll support us when it comes to town meeting.
I would say I generally concur that I think what you're doing is really good work. It's definitely, I think, something that's needed to have that study. I'm curious, you said what towns did you use as a model for a comparison as far as the
We're still,
zoning?
we just started having that conversation, so we're still fleshing that out.
Okay.
We're definitely open to suggestions. And it's tough because we don't have, one of the things that ULI suggests, the ULI report, the Urban Land Institute suggested, was making a more of a defined downtown space, whether that's by different sidewalks or flags or, something, or a sign, welcome to historic downtown Southborough, or, something that makes it more of a destination. They call it wayfinding. It's a thing. And, so we're trying to find towns, and we just, at our most recent meeting, had a whole discussion about what towns might work, and so we'll be, again, we're open to suggestions, but we'll be talking about that more and trying to look at what sort of zoning and design guidelines those towns have in place that help support that working.
Yeah, not that it would be an easy thing to do, but I guess the place to start is, do you find something that you think aligns more with what the people in Southborough would want? That would be where I think I would be first, is what is a good model based on, and what problems have they run into, but, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I've seen some of this done in like other towns, and I do real estate work myself, so in other towns I've had it, and there's certainly, I guess, things you can emulate, different towns do something like this for different reasons. Like, I'm doing some work right now in the town of Bourne. And they set up a whole like downtown redevelopment zone, mostly because no one was Bourne was really getting bad, and everyone would just bypass Bourne to go to Wareham, and then you can build anything you want there.
Yeah.
So they did, but it took them a long, they didn't just one day say we're going to do this, and then a couple meetings later they had a whole new zone. It was a long.
Oh, I know.
It's a very what you're going through is not. Is not too.
Oh,
it's not unique.
I know, and
so it was a little different reason why they did it, but it's even, it's even worth like looking up what they did, because they have, and it's not just one district, so there's a bunch of different districts. They, did a very the other thing they had to do is they had to do it because it's part of the Cape Cod Commission.
Oh, yeah.
So they did it so that anything in those zones get to bypass the Cape Cod Commission, but they're they put a lot of time and effort into, you can do this, you can't do that. And so that's, it's pretty helpful. So as, as an owner that wants to redevelop their property, or as a developer that wants to come in and do something, here's the guidelines. And if it says, yes, you can do it, you do it. If it says, no, you can't, then you can't. And if you want to, good luck in front of the Cape Cod Commission, or, and also getting a variance. So, some things like that work. There's, a lot of towns will put you can put like a size restriction or a height restriction on things.
Absolutely.
So if you want to avoid a big box retail coming in, it's quite simple to have that, in place, so you can't.
Yeah, you're right, because it's more than just stories. It's height, it's
Right,
it's setback.
and then I don't know if it's possible at all, but you can put some type of architectural control over things. So like if you try to do development, like all of Nantucket is a historical district.
Yep.
So you have to go in front of the powers that be to get anything you do approved. Parts of
those
like,
gray
you go to
shingles.
like Brookline or Newton, Chestnut Hill, same thing. You're in front of, it's a historic district. The whole Chestnut, the whole thing
And
is.
there's no reason why we shouldn't be like that as well.
So if people are worried about, geez, we want to see downtown looking better, but yet we don't want it to be taken advantage of, there's certainly ways to implement that, I think.
And do you know if you've given thought to whether, would it be like a as of right use or by a special permit?
That's another thing we're talking about, and it's it gets tricky because obviously the priority is to have something that will pass, and to pass, it might not be every little thing that we want. But that's where I think maybe the design guidelines could come in handy, because, you know, maybe there is some sort of by right use, if, you know, so long as they're complying with the design guidelines, and maybe we shift, you know, maybe that shifts the control a little bit, but again, we're open to different suggestions. I don't know that I have a solid answer for it, but that's definitely one of the things that we're thinking about. But we want to make sure we want to keep the planning board happy, so.
Thank you. Anything else? Debbie?
Yeah, I just want to say, I attended the selectmen's meeting last night and saw David's presentation, and mentioned to Julie beforehand, and it's very stunning, the sort of the before and after pictures, and it was a nice little slideshow, but it also really, one of the things that came about in some of those historic photos is the sense of community and people walking around and gathering and convening, and I think that was my takeaway. And that's, I think, what we're missing. And also, I mean, we're talking about what it is that we want, but I think it's also good to know, you know, some of the towns that, like, we see the Target or the Applebee's or the hotel go up, you know, and it's not what we want. So sort of this is what we want, this is what we don't want. My question, I think, was just in the wastewater, though, is, so I know you're just going about this and gonna check out with Weston and stuff, but are you fairly confident that it's something that can be done in downtown? And does that shape what you're thinking about for the zoning in any way?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we're still exploring. I mean, anything can be done if you have enough money, right? Like, something can be done. It's just figuring out a way to make it work. We know we're not depending on the town to give us money for that. So it's trying to think creatively and in ways that will work, so we can have it happen. And that's why we're thinking, you know, that's why we're putting the time into doing the research as to what systems are in place now. Because if somebody's, you know, if a small business owner is spending $300 a month, this is completely random, I have no idea, but if they're spending $300 a month to get their private tank cleaned out, and the tank's gonna be failing in 10 years, maybe they would take that same $300 to put into a community fund to have a more reliable treatment plan and be able to maybe expand their business, or at least not have a failing septic in a few years. So that's the kind of research we're doing right now. Part of the question is there space to put something in? Because even if it's 40 by 60, well, that's not super easy to come by here. But we are thinking about those options as well. We're working, there's a parcel of land actually owned by what's the utility company? Which one is it though?
Eversource?
National Grid. National Grid owns a parcel of land right downtown behind the pizza place that's not being used for anything. So we're trying to reach out to them to see, we've heard in other areas, sometimes they've just bought up land at different times and have sat on it. We might be able to get it for them for cheap or even free or for short money. And that might be an opportunity to to solve for septic, or to solve for a small pocket park, or some combination thereof, or parking. Like there's so little available land that could be a really great resource. So we're thinking about all of those things though. And we're still in the early planning phases, but we're making progress. We have a committee and a subcommittee, and both committees meet at least twice a month. And we're having meetings with Weston and with the Board of Health, and we're coming to everybody else's meetings. So we're spending a lot of time and gathering as much information as we can. Because like I said, we're not experts in this, but we're trying to utilize the resources best we can to engage the people who are experts without spending money, because we don't have any. So.
All right, anything else? Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for coming and sharing
I
with us.
appreciate your having us. Thank you.
Okay, next thing on our agenda is we need to vote on our positions for next year. So we need a chair and a clerk. Our current clerk is leaving, so we definitely need a clerk. If somebody is really wanting to be chair, I am happy to step aside. I'm not seeing a whole lot of takers there. And I will pull an Andrew Dennington and say, I have 2 years left on the board. I will do it one more year. I am not going to do it the last year I'm on the board. So if you guys want me to be chair again for another year, I will accept and go ahead and do that.
I'd make a motion to have you as chair again.
Second.
All those in favor? All right. I'm abstaining.
Just vote no.
No. And a clerk. The clerk doesn't do a whole lot.
No.
It's kind of a, I think the clerk is
Ceremonial.
really Katie, technically, but it has to be one of us. So if somebody would like to be the clerk, chances are where you will get called in if you're the clerk is if I can't make a meeting, I will probably reach out to the clerk and say, you get to be chair for the day. And I'll make sure you get a funny hat to wear when that happens. I know it's a selling point. So is anybody willing to be a clerk?
I'd be willing.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Should we
What else?
No,
arm wrestle for it?
Not,
Um,
yeah, not,
I think that'd be swell.
New.
I'm old.
by the way, that's not a good enough excuse.
All right, then I will nominate David for the clerk position.
I'll second that.
All in favor? All right,
I abstain.
there we go. Well, we'll do this as part of the votes, part of this one. A while ago, we had voted Andrew in to be our official representative on the master plan committee. With him not being on the board, he is no longer our official representative on the master plan committee. He is now an at-large member.
And I just want to say, sorry to interrupt you, but I had a misimpression that it would be okay if I was just, I didn't necessarily need to be on the ZBA to still be the ZBA
Yeah.
nominated person, but I was told at the last meeting that that's not the case. So I apologize for volunteering to get on the committee, and then halfway through it now, apparently, my understanding is that I can be an at-large member, but it means I don't think I could formally vote on things. So I think there is, I mean, based on the discussion that we had right now, there definitely is a role for someone from the ZBA to be on this committee. It's not a committee that's gonna last forever. It has a defined, I can't tell you when the expected end date is. I don't think it's more than another 6 months or so, but there's meetings, let's say, once a month, maybe twice a month, and it's all gearing up towards having a revised 2019, 2020 master plan. So I think that
Master plan proposal.
you're right. I don't know whether it needs to be adopted by town meeting or the planning board. I don't know.
It would probably have to be adopted by town meeting, which is why the 2008 zoning update master plan didn't ever go anywhere, because no one ever got it to the finish line of having it approved at town meeting, is my understanding. I just moved to town at that point, so I'm not really sure. But nonetheless, we need a representative. And Michael seems like he is well aware of what needs to go on in town. And I might just
I'd say that's a good
suggest
candidate.
that Michael be our representative
good
unless he adamantly
Another
refuses.
swell idea. I'll
And
nominate Mike
You're in
for
real
our-
estate, you're an attorney, this is zoning, it's laws, it seems like you check all the boxes.
He's got a-
You have historical
He's got a
knowledge of
long-
the town,
Long history of
Yeah,
Southborough.
in all reality.
you're not going anywhere, your kids are young.
Yeah, put me in. My wife's gonna kill me.
So I nominate Michael, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? And he abstains. If you want to vote no on the record, so you can tell your wife you voted no.
How do you
Probably
vote
the
now?
best for domestic tranquility.
It's compulsory.
I'm bullied.
Do you mind if I keep a
take
copy
it,
of that?
yeah.
Thanks.
All right,
When the hell is the next meeting of that?
Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is approving the meeting minutes from our last meeting. But before that, I did want to just offer a thank you to Andrew for his 5 years of service. He was a calming force for the board right after the Park Central event. And I think his leadership at the time was something the board needed, kind of gave a sense of stability and respect to the board that had been challenged, I think is a proper term. You didn't actually serve on the Park Central piece. That was Paul and Lee and
Just me now.
Eagle. But
We were down to 3 there for a while.
yeah, but nonetheless, I want to thank you for your service and appreciate all that you've done, and it's been great to serve with you on the board.
Well, thank you, Craig, and I've really enjoyed working with everyone, and I am gonna kind of miss it.
You can be an alternate. Come on, man.
Yeah.
We're down to no
Maybe.
alternates.
That's a great idea.
I also think that now is the time to just continue to think about people that might be interested in
Yes, we do
that
need.
serving, because
Anybody watching, we need 2 alternates. I'm talking directly to the camera. 2 alternates, that's what we need. Okay.
Telethon, you want to put the number out?
Call Brian Shea. But yeah, no, it's been great, and we all appreciate it, and we wish you best of luck on the next town board and committee you will be serving on, because it doesn't sound like you're going to fade off into the sunset anytime soon.
thank you.
So,
And I second that. You did a great job, and we are gonna miss you.
all right. Last thing on the agenda is the meeting minutes from the
From the meeting.
May?
Yeah.
May 1st. Do you have a copy of those?
You were absent.
Yeah.
You're gonna dock-
Yeah,
we're
so,
gonna dock your pay.
Andrew was absent and Mike was absent, so,
They switched the schedule.
Well, yeah, they,
yeah, we had an impromptu meeting because the only thing on the
Odd date.
agenda was to hear the variance application for the public facilities for their sign, for the public safety building. I wasn't sure why we had to do it so quickly. It's not like we could really say no, but we do
We
have
were
the
tough
meeting.
on 'em, though.
I know, we did actually ask a few questions.
Let's get into this.
is there any runoff from the sun?
Yep.
Butters ejected.
So I looked at this earlier. If anybody else wants to take a quick look.
I
if they didn't-
actually reviewed them in the email we got. And,
Okay.
And I find them to be pretty good, so if we're looking to, I would vote to accept the minutes
As written?
as written from May 1.
Second?
All those in favor? Aye. And then Andrew and Mike will abstain as they weren't there. And it passes then. And that is it for our agenda.
All folks,
So do I get to do my specialty now?
Well, hold on. Actually,
What do we have upcoming?
so upcoming, we have a meeting on the 17th of May,
Of May.
or July, sorry.
Awesome.
It says July, I swear to God, I just chose not to read. And we have 3 things pending in that right now. One is the Northborough Road property, the kind of not public storage, but kind of
The
industrial,
contractor storage. and-
Contract.
yeah.
definitely not contract. It's the industrial condo type thing. Officially, our previous approval had lapsed because it took a while for them to get through the planning action, then they had a little snafu with the land sale. Someone who was somehow associated with the land from back then raised their hand and somehow wasn't consulted, so they had to go through some stuff. So they're gonna come back and basically ask the same things they asked us before, but, you know, technically, we wanna make sure they're current, so there aren't any issues on them going forward. There is, there we go. 8 Maple Street is a special permit to convert a single family to a two-family under 174.9G. And the next thing is 25 Marlborough Road to install 4 70-foot tall athletic lighting systems at Turf Field at 32 Marlborough Road. And that's
Where's the turf field on Marlborough Road?
St. Mark's?
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's.
I was thinking of the
across
9/11 field.
It's not far,
over there.
it's right back,
That's
I
why
think
you
it's
had
the
me
one right back
confused.
here.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess it's Marlborough Road up that
Oh, that
side
is-
and
yeah, that's-
Corderville that way.
No, it is Marlborough Road, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I was just confused.
Yep. So those are the 3 things in front of us at this point. I don't think there's enough time for anybody else to submit and go forward. One of the things we did institute with Katie and Lori is a definitive time frame. Application by this date, heard by this date. And so we're ideally implementing a situation where we are firmly only going to have 1 meeting a month. People know when they need to apply by. If they don't, they know they're waiting for
Right.
a whole nother
And,
series.
And we're gonna try to stick to the third Wednesday
Third Wednesday of the month is
at 7 o'clock.
at 7 o'clock. That is the plan, unless for some reason, like, the third Wednesday happens to be like the last night of, town meeting can't be it's on weekends now, so that's not gonna happen. But something else happens on it.
Yeah, if it's
Yeah.
the Wednesday before Thanksgiving or
Right, yeah,
something, or
we'll make do. So, but yeah, that's the plan.
Excellent.
Okay? All right.
So now my specialty.
Paul, do the honors.
I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting, or end the meeting, or whatever we normally do.
Oh, that is second.
Okay.
All right. All in favor? Michael seconded. Fantastic. We are adjourned.